I'm sure everybody's heard the saying that slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Well, usually that's used for people that are learning a new skill, and the idea is to slow yourself down to a point where you're not messing things up, and that's fine. But there's actually a way that we learn procedural memory. There's a couple of ways that people learn procedural memories, and it may depend on the activity and it may depend on the individual on how they actually establish neuroplasticity. But there's a couple of ways scientifically that we know that people can learn. And one method is a three-step process. So you have the cognitive phase. It's broken down into 3 phases. It's not steps, but phases. You have a cognitive phase where you're breaking everything down into steps and you're consciously following along. Like say for a reload or a malfunction, you break it down. For a reload, you basically identify, cover, lock, strip, rack or clear or whatever, and then load and then back in. So you'd have that put out as your cognitive steps to follow, and you do that over and over and over again. And then what you do is you go to the next phase. Once you've not really mastered it, but you understand it to a point where it's breezy, it's easy breezy. The next thing is to establish an associative, get into the associative phase where you establish an association for that. So a feeling for what it'll feel like when you actually need to initiate that procedure. So then, like for reloads, what is a very common drill for people to do? 1 or 2 rounds in the magazine, and then bang, bang, so they feel what it's like when the slide is locked back, or it was the last shot fired or whatever. And like in an AK, you get the click, and then they run through the procedure. They have that association, and then you just run through that procedure, based off that association. So you're in the associative phase. And then you get into the autonomous or procedural phase, and at this point you've really mastered it. You may not actually be fast, but you've mastered it. And this is where some people are told slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And it's because they're trying to push this procedure that they are well aware of even faster. And that's not a bad thing. However, the best way to get faster once you've already established a procedural memory is constant repetition. And that's not necessarily going as fast as you can. That's just going as fast as you can without screwing up. And that's just, I would say, normal speed. So you're not, snailing yourself through a reload or snailing yourself through a clearance drill. Like for me, with some of the guns that I had, I got really good at clearing Type 3 malfunctions. Lock, strip, clear, load, back in. I got really good at that. And that's just because I had to do it so many times. And so when I get it and I get that brief identification, I just know to run through the drill, and there it is. So there's another way that we can develop a procedural memory, and that is the predictive cycle. And this is where you're basically giving the student, or the student is given an end goal. So the idea here is you let them attempt it. You tell them what the end result should be. Like, I want you to reload your pistol. So they attempt, or you would say, I want you to reload the gun in 3 or 4 seconds or whatever. So they attempt, they fail to meet that time, and you can continue whatever your method is, I don't care. But the next phase is implicit analysis of what happened. So you break everything down that they did and say, okay, that was good, so why don't we try changing this one step? And that's where the change comes in. So you make implicit changes for the next go so they can be cognitively aware. Okay, so now I'm going to change my magazines around so the bullets are facing forward, so I'm going to try indexing this time and see if that works. And then they just go through their procedure from there. And then it's just a vicious cycle until that person builds up a neurological connection and an association with this procedure. Like, okay, this is what happens, and they just build that association sympathetically. That's not saying that's always a good way to do it. That's just a way that people develop procedural memory. So it's not necessarily needing to slow down. It's more just needing to understand the steps that they need to take. And sometimes this is Just understanding the end result, it can be challenging because if there's a lot of steps to it, perhaps that person would do better with this method. Going through different phases where you're taught everything correctly and you're just going through that phase over and over and over again, and then you learn association while doing that over and over and over again, and then you just get put through tests or courses of fire or something like that. So slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Not necessarily, because we're not trying to go slow. We don't want to try to go slow, because when you actually tell someone that has a very good procedural memory to touch on the brakes, they're more likely to fumble. In my experience, are more likely to fumble. So going back to the basics is not always a good idea for people, because sometimes the brain will try to rewire itself just to accommodate you wanting them to go slow or somebody wanting you to go slow. So, you know, it is what it is. But there are ways to develop procedural memory, and slow is smooth, smooth is fast is associated with the concept of building a procedural memory that is done faster. So, you know, at least that's my analysis of the whole thing. So, with all that said, I appreciate you guys watching. Leave a comment below, and you guys have a good one.